So hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce the ALBA webinar series Breaking Down the Ivory Tower 7th episode, entitled A Journey of Self-Awareness Towards Understanding Disability. So today is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and it is a pleasure to have this webinar here today that will be given by Dr. Dionna Williams, by Emory University from the US, and we have the pleasure to have her here. So the ALBA network is an international network of neuroscientists that are committed with the DEI principles to foster inclusion and advocate for actions and policies to counteract bias and build inclusive research cultures. So in science and academia. So we aim at empower brain scientists to be effective DEI advocates and allies, to share data, best practices and resources to counter bias and discrimination. And we also aim at recognizing outstanding contributions to science and diversity, mainly that are coming from underrepresented groups. So we also aim at offer better visibility. We invite you all to get involved in ALBA. For that, you can become a member for free. You just have to sign up. And to sign the ALBA declaration that I will show next in a few slides. You also may want to be even more involved, and for that you can, for example, host a DEI event with the collaboration of ALBA, or you can join as a volunteer in an ALBA working group. You also can engage with us in the social media, and we invite you all to do so. So our main activities are based to create awareness and advocacy. For that, we established a declaration on equity and inclusion that I've told you before. We promote webinars and panel discussions addressing global and intersectional diversity. And we also advocate for inclusive research environment with policymakers, funding agencies, and institutions. We also have data and resources in our website, in the ALBA network website, that you can search for. We promote visibility and recognition, and for that we have awards that I will talk a little bit more later. And we also ask for neuroscientists with success stories to share as a way to create role models. Then we host some workshops and networking at conferences to promote networking, and also creating mentoring frameworks for development of careers of underrepresented researchers. If you want to know more, you can scan this QR code that will lead you to the impact report of ALBA network during the year of 2024. So this is the ALBA declaration that I was talking about. So you can sign it either as an individual or you can ask your institutions to sign the declaration as well. And we invite you all, as long as you agree with the DEI principles that we hope you do, please sign it and become a member. So these are the awards. So ALBA has some awards to recognize neuroscientists. This is mainly created to help neuroscientists from underrepresented backgrounds to be recognized. So there are two prizes that are open already or will open soon. No, they are open. Sorry, it's stated there. They are open already, and the deadline will be in January for both of them. We have the ALBA Roche Research Prize for Excellence in Neuroscience And the ALBA FKNE Diversity Prize right now open, and then in the summer of next year, it will open the ALBA Elsevier Award Lecture on Brain Sciences. So if you want to apply, please scan the QR code to have more information on the eligibility criteria and the kind of prizes that they are, or visit them in the website of the ALBA. We also have the ALBA Travel Awards that may be helpful to attend for some conferences. So these are our sponsors. We are very proud to have these organizations sponsoring ALBA Network activities, the prize that I've shown you before, and the activities that we promote. And this is our working group. So it is formed by volunteers. Its name is Disability and Accessibility Working Group. It aims at increase the visibility of neuroscientists with disabilities, to raise awareness around disabilities in the workplace, and to encourage best practices within institutions to foster inclusion and equal access to opportunities. These are some activities that are ongoing. We have some of them that we performed in the past. For example, we wrote an editorial that you can find in the Journal of Neuroscience. We have running right now these small videos named Breaking Barriers, Inclusivity and Accessibility Tips for Neuroscience, where we give a small tip. They are very, very short, these videos, and I invite you to watch them through this link or through the ALBA website. And we give a small tip to overcome a challenge. And we are looking for new people to perform these videos. So if you are interested, please contact us through the email of disability@alba.network. We are also creating a database of neuroscientists with disabilities. And for that, we also invite you to join, to contact us and to be part of this database. You might be contacted later, for example, to give some advice or input on accessibility initiatives, to participate in events, to be speaker at a conference, a network, or for example, in our webinar series, and to contribute to improve policies. So feel free, if you have some interest on these kind of actions, to sign or to give your interest and to be part of this database. And then we have the Breaking Down the Ivory Tower series. So it was created to bring down the ivory tower of ableism within research community. And we invite different extraordinary neuroscientists each time with the diverse backgrounds, perspectives, and pathways. So this time we will have Dr. Dionna, that Donna will present you right away. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm going to introduce our speaker. We're very lucky to have Dr. Dionna Williams, who is an associate professor at Emory University in the US. Their research focuses on the neuroscience of HIV, including the effects of inflammation, HIV therapies, and substance abuse on the brain and cognition in HIV, as well as immunologic and pharmacologic contributors to health disparities. Dionna is a first-generation college, was a first-generation college student, and completed their undergraduate studies at Hofstra University and PhD at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, both in New York City. They then went to Johns Hopkins for a postdoc in neuroscience, immunology, and pharmacology. And while they were there, also completed a certificate in health disparities and health inequalities from the School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins. Dionna has received prestigious awards, including the NIH K99R00 Pathway to Independence Award, which is a very competitive early career award. And also the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers, which recognizes early career researchers with exceptional potential for leadership. We're very lucky to have them here today to share their journey in academia as someone living with multiple disabilities and who will reflect on the intersecting ways in which these experiences are shaped by their experiences as a non-binary Black woman that comes from a disadvantaged background. So before I turn it over to Dionna, I just want to welcome everybody to please put your questions in the Q&A tool during the talk if things come to mind, and then we'll be following Dionna's talk with a discussion. So thank you. Thanks so much, Dionna.
Can everyone see my slides okay? All right, fantastic. Thank you for the very kind introduction and opportunity to be here. I'm really excited to kind of share my journey with you today, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A after. So as was mentioned, I'm going to talk about my journey of self-awareness towards understanding disability. Despite having multiple disabilities, I didn't know this until fairly recently. And so I'll talk about my journey and how that's impacted things. I'll begin with just a little bit about me. My name is Dionna. I use they, them pronouns. A visual descriptor of me is that I'm a person of African descent with red glasses and a short afro. I have multiple disabilities. I'm autistic, I have a learning disability, I have a chronic health condition, and I have a mental health condition as well. And so I come to this seminar today having the perspective of someone with a lived experience of being disabled, also mentoring and teaching people with disabilities professionally, and then navigating seeking accommodations for myself, both as I teach and mentor, and as a parent. And then also, I've received formal training in pedagogy, teaching, and mentorship of people with disabilities. That being said, though, I am not an expert in all things. And so I'm going to talk about my very personal experiences with some considerations for how it may translate more broadly. Um, so what is disability? I think it's important to begin with this because, as I mentioned, I didn't know that I was disabled. And I think it's because it's inconsistently defined. There are either limited or really vague descriptions of disabilities. And I think a lot of people, and I know I certainly considered only physical disabilities, people that have challenges with movement, or that require use of mobility devices. And so there's a narrow perspective of what can count as a disability. Also, in all definitions, there's some kind of discussion of how the condition impacts your daily living or ability to work. Descriptions can differ widely depending upon where you live and who the definition is pertaining to. So it may vary if you're looking at work versus school or versus trying to access, for instance, disability benefits. And then combined with just a general lack of ability to see people in the media and public perception, people either have minimal, inaccurate, or incomplete representations of what it is to be someone with disabilities. So I'm including here just the dictionary definition, just so you can see it, and I'll compare and contrast it. So this is somewhat broad in that it does include physical, mental, cognitive, or developmental conditions that again are going to impair some level of activities or tasks. A secondary definition does discuss the fact that it may impede your ability to engage in gainful employment, and that's where the part you'll see trying to access benefits comes in most common. I'm in the US, and so in the US, we have the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. This was passed in 1990, and this is what makes it unlawful to discriminate against someone in the US based upon them having a disability. Um, but this was really hard for me to understand when I first read it because you can have a record of the impairment even if you don't currently have it, and you may not have it, but you're considered to have it. So it was very confusing for me personally when I was newly becoming aware of disabilities. Um, and these kind of contrast to different consideration of disabilities. This is the so-called social model of disability. Um, this perspective is really interesting because it considers the fact that the oppression and inclusion of people with disabilities is because of society and their structural systems and barriers that make people disabled. And so it's because of lack of access, infrastructure, employment opportunities, stereotypes, services that are societal barriers that limits people's ability to have gainful employment, for instance. And so this kind of contrasts with the more dictionary or medical-based models that discuss people having special needs. A lot of these definitions are going to be deficits-based and around the consideration that we need to cure or fix someone, and thinks of all the things that they cannot do. The social model, in contrast, really looks at the humanity of people and thinks about people's strengths, that people have just inherent equal rights because they're human beings, and that with adequate support and taking a holistic approach, they'll have better support and they can have access to things that will improve their quality of life. Many people consider both aspects of these as important to disability, but it really is kind of a personal definition, and you'll hear people's perspectives change. I just want to highlight ALBA's definition that I think is really inclusive and was much considered and thought after. And I like the fact that so much effort went to having broad categories of people um, based upon different conditions, differences, but also that it does include some aspects of the social model, thinking of contextual and environmental factors that impact people's ability to function and participate in life. And so, with that introduction, I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of the rights that people have now uh, are because of advocacy and the disability rights movement. This picture is in black and white, but it's from 1990s, which was not that long ago. Again, I'm in the US, and this is when we had the ADA with people protesting for their rights to have access to society, equal education. And so we've come a tremendous way from 30 years ago, but it wasn't without sacrifice and lots of social justice that has been going on and protesting for years and years and decades even. I just want to commend the people who helped us get where we are today. I also want to have this important concept of disability and intersectionality. I think it's really imperative to consider all the unique ways disability impacts lives of people because people are varied. And so those differences are going to impact how disability impacts our lives. So people differ with respect to age, class, socioeconomic status, country of origin, citizenship status, racial ethnic background, gender sexuality, educational attainment, level of support needed, and access to resources. And you can imagine with all those differing permutations and just differing levels of support that people need, disability is going to look different for different people, even if they have the same diagnosis. And so I'm going to touch on some of the ways that these intersecting backgrounds have impacted my experiences. And I also just want to make sure you really understand I'm discussing my lived experience. I'm an N of one. So I open up by discussing and identifying the diagnoses that I have, but I do not speak for everyone that has these diagnoses. Although there will probably be some shared common themes. And I encourage you to get to know people with differing disabilities because they're people and they're going to have really unique stories. All right, so let's talk about my early childhood. I'll begin by discussing lived experience. So I was a premature baby, and because I was born really premature, I had a lot of health complications, and I was sick a lot as a kid. Thankfully, a lot of those things resolved in time as they got stronger. but I missed a lot of school, and maybe from like 5 to 10 years old. The one thing that persisted though was eczema, which may not always be considered a disability, but for me it was because it was incredibly severe. So much so that I couldn't bathe with water, I couldn't be in the sun, and I couldn't even play that strenuously because I would sweat and the sweat would burn and irritate my skin. So it profoundly impacted my quality of life and daily living. I also was undiagnosed uh, as being autistic. Um, I was perceived and socialized as a girl. And in the US in the 1990s, girls couldn't even get a diagnosis of autism. So I wasn't on anyone's radar. I also didn't know I had dyscalculia, which is a learning disability that makes math, numbers, dates, units of measurement challenging. And I knew I struggled with those things, but I found ways to compensate and got good enough grades. And when you're a quiet kid and you get good enough grades, people just tend to overlook you. But being undiagnosed autistic was really a huge hurdle, um, because I just didn't realize why it was hard to make friends, why the things that bothered me didn't seem to bother other people, like loud noises, loud lights. I had really big challenges when I thought I understood a rule and the rule was broken, or conversely, when there was a rule that I thought wasn't fair, why I had to adhere to that rule. And you can imagine as a kid, that's a problem for adults. And then I also had a very complex childhood with lots of different traumas. And so all those things combined led to a very unique outview and perspective on life. And you can also imagine most of those things were not visible to other people. And so I really didn't know that I had any disabilities, even though I would miss months of school, or I couldn't go into the sun, or I couldn't go into water, things like that. And I thought a lot of my autism traits were just personality quirks that were kind of unique to me. And I thought I was just bad at math. And so I just had no idea. On the flip side, though, I was really privileged as a kid in school in that I had exposure to teachers with disabilities. So I had teachers that were visually impaired, those that lived with cerebral palsy or spinal cord injury, and who were paraplegic as a result. And I even had a teacher that was an ambulatory wheelchair user. And I think that was instrumental because even though I didn't know I was disabled, it taught me from a young age to respect people with disabilities as anybody else. They were teachers, they taught me, they knew what they were doing. And I didn't see them as any different than anybody else. Conversely, though, I also realized as a kid that I really didn't see kids with disabilities um, unless it was just in passing, like walking in the hallway. And then I also learned that it was common to make fun of children with disabilities in school, and I didn't understand why that was the case. And so complex and nuanced consideration of disabilities as a kid. As I progressed in my training and went to university for college, um, things became more nuanced. I didn't understand why school was so hard for me academically, in a sense of I did well, I got good grades, but I had to work incredibly hard for them. I realized I had to make systems and strategies to support myself academically. Things like sitting in the front of the classroom because I get incredibly distracted. And I can't pay attention if I'm not right in front of a teacher. I had to ask a lot of questions due to auditory processing difficulties. And also, I realized that I have a hard time understanding people if the teacher is facing the board writing and not looking at me. And so that led to a lot of confusion and things I just didn't understand. On exams, I developed ways to answer the easiest questions or answer the shortest questions first, because it was really hard for me to sit in a room with everyone and people are typing on their keyboard. So it's a lot of clacking and very loud, coughing or blowing their nose or lots of background noise. It was incredibly stressful. And so I often didn't finish the exams. I just answered the questions that I could first and left the room. as quickly as I could. I later learned from friends that thought I was just super smart and that I just knew stuff, but I wasn't. I was struggling, and no one knew. And then I also, being a science major, there's a lot of math. I took a lot of chemistry, calculus, calculus-based physics, um, and then I had lots of labs that require calculations. And I developed what other people thought were complicated ways to do the math that no one else seemed to understand. So when I had to show my work, they didn't really get it, but I had the right answer, and so they said okay. Um, so I found ways to support myself. But you can imagine if I had had accommodations, it would have been so much easier. I wouldn't have had to work so hard to create ways for me to do well. And while I still struggled socially, I didn't understand a lot about my peers. Um, it was less pressing because I was being a first generation college student. It was really important that I graduate. And then also I come from a low income background. So I worked 4 jobs while being a college student full time, including one out of state. And so I just worked a lot and I didn't really have time to socialize. And so it was there, but it didn't impact me as much. In my PhD, I still use the kind of workarounds I had developed in college to do well academically. But it was really stressful because I was a biochemistry major, but at my university, that meant mostly chemistry and physics. I'd only taken 2 bio classes. So when it came time for me to take gene expression, cell biology, immunology, microbiology, I didn't know those topics. And so I felt like I was back at the beginning. It was incredibly stressful. And so I started doing what's called pain stimming. Unconsciously, I didn't know what it was at the time. It's a self-regulatory technique that some people use when they're autistic to help self-regulate by doing activities that are painful. It can be very minor or more severe. And so mine was scratching, which helped just make me feel better. The problem was it caused my eczema to flare up. And so that was really a challenging time. And then I found exercise as a great way to de-stress, and it helped with that. But again, the sweat irritated my skin and also made my eczema worse. And so it was just hard for me to find ways to cope. And I was having all these internal battles that no one knew about and that I also didn't know that other people didn't face. So I just didn't talk to anybody about it. I realized that my background was really unique. Um, Other people didn't relate. And so I just didn't talk to folks about personal things at that time. Um, and then also, as I was mentioned, I went to college and grad school in New York. And at the time, there was this thing used called stop and frisk, which was when you were able to be stopped by the police if they just suspected that you look suspicious for any reasons, which is incredibly stressful. So imagine you're just going out. New York, they have a subway, so you're taking the subway, you're just going to the grocery store and being pulled over by a police officer, stopped, questioned, or having my hands wiped for explosives when I'm just a boring person, to be honest, normal, boring person. And so you can imagine that's incredibly stressful and something that I couldn't really feel comfortable sharing with my PI or my lab mates because they didn't understand what I was going through. So all of these things exacerbated everything I was already feeling that was already stressful. During my postdoc. It was a really interesting period of my life. I struggled and I realized that the ways I survived before didn't work anymore. I moved to a new area of the country where I had no previous experience, no family, no friends. And my PhD lab was incredibly supportive. And I moved to a new lab that was much less supportive. And I felt very alone. And so I started masking even more, particularly my autistic traits. I had learned things that were better or less received well by other people. And so you kind of change yourself to be better liked. One big way that this was in my gender expression and presentation. I thought that if I presented as female as possible, highly long hair, dresses, things like that. It helped my career and I was seen more professionally. But as someone that's non-binary, that was incredibly stressful on the inside. Um, I did my postdoc at Johns Hopkins, which is in Baltimore. And in that year, we had the Baltimore uprisings due to police brutality. And it led to me feeling incredibly unsafe and some feelings of reliving experiences as a kid in my PTSD that were really, really hard. And again, I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody about it because they wouldn't understand. I was the only Black person in my entire department. And so this led to my having incredibly diminished capacity to do things. Additionally, as a postdoc, I began seeking care from a dermatologist for my eczema, but having postdoc benefits, they were really unaffordable, the treatments, and inaccessible. They required me to go have treatments like every day for a couple of months, and it required a lot of time away from lab. And so I just didn't feel like I could do that as a postdoc. So that coupled with the stress led to a really, really bad flare-up. And I actually had a common complication. I was misdiagnosed, but because I was misdiagnosed, I got the wrong treatments and the wrong, um, I ended up losing all the skin on my hands. And so I had to regrow for a period of months. So I couldn't come to work. I couldn't do any bench work or pipette or wear gloves until the new skin was completely regrown. And you can imagine as a postdoc trying to tell your PI, I can't come to work for these months. Can you still pay me so I can keep getting medical care? And I can't give you any data, but I'm in a lot of pain. It was really stressful. And the treatment required me to be temporarily immune compromised, which made me concerned just leaving the house. And so during my postdoc, I went through autistic burnout, which at the time I didn't know that's what it was, but this is really common when you have severe demands, a lot of needs that aren't getting met. It is different than workplace burnout, but there are some commonalities. For me, I needed extreme time alone to recharge. I didn't sleep well. I had difficulty with self-care. Um, Things like going to the bathroom, eating, those just aren't priorities. I was overwhelmed, incredibly exhausted, lack of motivation in work, and yeah, it was just a really lonely couple of years because again, I was struggling and no one knew. I didn't fully understand, and I didn't know how to kind of get out of this phase. I was really fortunate though that in time I did find a fantastic group of friends. Um, I found ways to support myself, for instance, like not going to the grocery store in person, or maybe going at the last half an hour before they closed when it was the least full. Um, on the weekends, I would stay in bed, not talk to anybody, and decrease all my demands to kind of help get the energy I needed to get through the week. So I found ways to cope, but it was a very challenging time. And so now, professionally as faculty, how does it look like for me today? Well, I had major life changes. I was married, but it was an abusive marriage, and so I went through divorce. I had a baby. I receive formal diagnoses now for my disabilities, and I understood disability more, so I now know better how to accommodate, for instance, my eczema and ways to prevent flare-ups. I began the process of unmasking my autism and finding ways to just live a better, more authentic life. And I sought formal accommodations at work once I better understood the things that would help me. And it's been fantastic. These have been the best kind of 3 to 5 years of my life that I finally found ways to accommodate myself and I better understand my unique needs. And so because of this and this life of not fully understanding my needs, it's made me incredibly passionate about supporting those with disabilities, and wanting to advocate for the people that I teach in the classroom, um, people in my lab or other people that I mentor getting accommodations, um, and developing particularly a neurodiverse affirming lab environment. I've had to help people figure out how we can get service animals in the lab, which is actually much harder than you might imagine, because you have to ensure the animal's safety and well-being as well as the person's. And also as faculty, I now have privilege that I never had before. I have the ability to be an advocate, be very vocal, and to be visible. And so I speak up often. There have been times when I've been on admissions committees and I've had to challenge people's perceptions about someone's capabilities because they disclose a disability, for instance. And so some of the things I've learned is that we have to keep in mind that there will be people that haven't actually received a diagnosis or support as children. I know we think a lot about the fact that people are just disabled and everyone is aware, but that was not my case. I did not know for all of the training. So I never got accommodations in ways that would have dramatically changed my educational and scientific training experiences. And then when people do get accommodations, I learned they're primarily considered for undergrads. But as you go along the academic trajectory through PhD and postdoc, it's actually harder because you're not taking as many formal classes. So an accommodation, for instance, of getting more time on an exam isn't particularly relevant for you anymore because you're not taking exams in that way. They're not really considered for laboratory environments where people may pipette or have to consider the size of the doorway so they can get through it, things of that nature. And the onus is on the disabled individual, which is really challenging if they're a trainee, because there's a fear of outing themselves if it's an invisible disability and how that'll be perceived. But then also they have to consider the hierarchy of academia. A trainee is incredibly vulnerable because all of their next career steps depend on a letter of recommendation. And so there's the concern that if they disclose their disability, or maybe they have a chronic condition that is relapse remitting or has flare-ups, they may have differing energies or different times where they cannot work. And so if someone considers them lazy or not hardworking, that may impact their ability to get their next job, for instance, or a good letter of recommendation. Um, Another thing I've realized is that scientists as a whole, and in neuroscience, we think about disabilities like psychiatric or mental health conditions as people that need to be studied. Many of us work on disease-oriented research, which is really fantastic. But we don't often think of the fact that these people that have these disabilities can also be scientists. They're also the ones doing the research. And so I just want to shout out, was mentioned at the beginning, the ALBA database of scientists with disabilities. We're not that few people. There's actually quite a lot of us, and we're outstanding, brilliant, talented scientists. Um, and I also want to shout out a really recent paper that came out. Um, and I want to hearken some of the messages that were in this paper. We have to also consider scientists with lived experiences as people that can do the work, but also um, their perspectives on their disease, disorder, or condition. Um, because if you don't have that experience or you're not familiar with someone with their lived experience, you're going to have a lot of bias and judgment. And I think of this a lot as someone that's autistic, and I see a lot of autism research. Um, there's a lot of incongruity with how people think about autism versus how I think of it as someone that is living with autism. And so with that, I just want to end um, and challenge people to think about how can you make science a more inclusive place for people with disabilities. We all can do something, even if you think I'm just a student, I don't have much power. You can advocate for someone in a way that feels safe or comfortable, or you can challenge someone when they say something that you think is insensitive or unfair. And I also really want to challenge people that are more senior that have far more power, like faculty, just stand up and do the right thing. Because we can't do our best science if everyone is not able to be there and to show up with the full capacity to do the work that we know they can do. And so with that, I'll stop sharing and I hope we have time for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dionna. That was really fantastic and so great to hear about your journey and um, the way in which I think you just did such a fantastic job of how all these different aspects of like intersectionality have kind of come together for you and how that's had um, uh, shaped your journey through academia this far. Um, so yeah, so we'll open up the floor for people to please put your questions in the Q&A. I'm going to start with one first. It was interesting, I think, in the definitions about disability, this idea that in order for it to be like legitimate, it must be affecting your ability to access gainful employment or to maintain employment. And certainly in my own experience and of others that I know, inside and outside of academia, oftentimes people will need to alter the rest of their life and what they do outside their lives in order to actually maintain a job. And so then that sort of brings up this thing of like not really meeting the definition, if that's what it is. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that, on ways to kind of deal, with the kind of broader impacts on the rest of your life and how that might have affected you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the tie between disability and ability to work is purely from a capitalist framework. Humans have so much more worth than their ability to generate money. Um, and so I do not like that that's intrinsically tied to the definition. And I wish it was considered differently.
Mm,
Um, that being said, it is often a part of how people consider it. And I want to push back because people may be able to work technically. They may have the, like, yes, they may be able to go to a job at an extreme cost to their well-being.
yeah.
And I think that well-being is worth something, right? And is important. And so I have sacrificed so much of my well-being professionally over the years with working way too hard and forgetting to, like I said, go to the bathroom or eat. Or being autistic, I can hyper fixate and hyper focus on things, which is fantastic, but it can also lead to extreme overwork. If I'm really in it, I can work 18-hour days and like, because I'm loving it. And then I can't do anything for like the next 2 days because I'm
Mm,
exhausted. Um, or it can impact my ability to have relationships with other people because I don't want to socialize with you after that. I'm done. And so, yes, people may be able to work, meaning that they may be able to get to a job, stay there for 8 hours a day, and then come home. But will they have energy to be able to cook? Will they have a flare-up of their condition that requires months
mm,
of recovery? I don't think one that our worth is tied to if we can work or not, and we shouldn't be forced to push ourselves in a way
mm,
that's unhealthy. And so I'm trying my best to take care of myself by when I know I have very, very busy times, like let's say grant writing time, I reduce all my demands on my life. So my
right.
kitchen's gonna be messier. My laundry is not gonna be folded,
Mm,
um, because those are things that aren't time pressing. So when my house is neat and I have all my food cooked, I'm doing really well and I'm having, a well-balanced life.
yeah.
But in times where I have to work harder, that I try to limit, I reduce other areas to make it easier for myself to get through that and where that's healthy.
Mm, yeah, that's great.
So if
Katerina.
I pick up on your answer, and try to know your opinion on that. So one thing that I would like really to be changed in the system right now is that people with disabilities have to do the same thing in the same amount of time. And it's not possible, neither in daily, neither throughout your career. So this is something that I've been trying to raise awareness because my CV is judged with my colleagues that don't have any disability, and it is not fair at all. So I won't be able to get a position for sure if I have the same time of research. And most often I have the comment from the reviewers that with that time you should have more publications, or you should have more independence, or so on. And it's very hard to, I mean, to do that, right? So yeah, I see that you're agreeing, because I don't know if you want to comment anything about that. You also referred that you suffer from a lot of stress during your PhD and your postdoc, and maybe it wouldn't solve everything, but maybe if you had more time to do, for example, the PhD, you would feel less stressed and with less pressure, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Um, it's really hard to be held to the same standard of everyone else, or really just your unique needs aren't considered. And so you feel this pressure of, I have to do this if I'm gonna be competitive for this fellowship or for this job. And I'm definitely have been in the room where people are saying, well, been a postdoc for 2 years. Why don't they have 5 papers already? And it's people like me that push back and stand up and say, hey, they disclose this. We have to consider that.
Yeah.
This is really hard because you can either disclose and tell people how this impacts you with the hope that they'll keep it in mind, because unless they say you have X disability, we're not going to hire you because of that disability. It's not discrimination, right? It's bias. And you can't do a lot about it's not illegal to
Yeah.
not be a good person, right? To be biased.
Yeah.
And so to be considered, you have to be share these like very personal things with people that you shouldn't have to. I am to the point now where I am very open. Like I said, I have more privilege than I ever did before, but mostly it comes from the point of I'm just tired. I'm tired of not being able to say, this is my life and this is how it impacts me.
Yeah.
I've suffered for years because no one knew what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. And so I'm just not going to do that anymore. But I realized there is immense privilege in that. Not everyone feels safe or comfortable doing that. And so I would say make your own definitions, your own timelines of success. Because what is the point of you rushing to meet these milestones if you're wearing yourself down, or it's giving you need so much time to recover from those experiences. It's not good for you. And so, yes, the dream, what people may be telling you need to do is to get X opportunity in X years of time. That may not be something that's best for you. And so I've had to reevaluate, well, what do I want? And why do I want that thing? I think a lot of stress my PhD was because I was told I should want this thing. And I worked incredibly hard to get it. And I did not sleep enough. I did not eat enough. I didn't take any vacation. I didn't do a thing to support myself. And so my CV was fantastic. Like I was incredibly productive as a PhD student. And I had a lot of cost to my health and well-being because of that.
Mm.
Another,
Um, oh,
sorry, sorry, Donna.
Oh, I
Please.
was just going to say a question that we have from one of our audience members. They're mentioning that they have, a lot of ongoing chronic health conditions, meaning that they often miss events, meetings, or days of work. And you mentioned missing, sometimes months of work. and then kind of worrying a lot about whether they can, really manage their PhD. And, that even if people around them are understanding, they're really afraid of feeling of being seen as unreliable, and people kind of getting tired of the fact that they're sort of not kind of living up to what they feel obligated that they should be. And so are there ways in which you navigate those feelings and that kind of fear of not being enough while being in your research career?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think those are all incredibly valid and really common. The best advice I can give about that is to, let's say if you're a PhD student, be incredibly open with your mentor about how your disability impacts you personally. I've learned a lot of people don't really know what the word means. So if I say I'm autistic, that means very little to people. But if I say, I struggle with this, I need more time for this experience is hard for me, it makes it tangible. And I think a good mentor, because we don't all have good mentors, but a good mentor, if you say, this is what this looks like for me, I have this chronic condition, and it's unpredictable. I may be doing fine, and then this thing is going to happen. I need your support in this. And I've learned to say language like, I know you want me to succeed because what PI is going to say, I don't want you to succeed, out loud at least. And so I say, I know you want me to succeed, and to do this, I need your help. And then I've kind of find like quantifiable things. I will get this to you in this time frame if I am in optimal condition and everything is going good. If I have a flare up, I will communicate it to you as quickly as I can, as soon as it's medically safe. And when that happens, let's make a plan for how I can get back on track. I also encourage you to use your university as well. Talk to the PI, get them on board. Um, but you do have a disability. People fought and died for legal protections, so use them. I would go to whoever the powers that be at your institution are and say, hey, this is what we've agreed to. I want you to formally recognize this,
Yeah.
right? Because I don't want you to come say to me, well, you're a 6 year student and you don't have a paper yet. I'm aware of that. And it's because of this. And so
Mm.
for you to not honor this agreement is discrimination. And again, you shouldn't have to do that. It's not the first steps. Ideally, you would talk to your PI, then your chair, then your program director. You would hopefully not have to resort to saying, I have legal rights. But I have found it's better to go into it with all the protections in place, everyone knowing what's going on, a plan in mind, than for you to say at the end, oh, well, I have this disability. And so it's not fair. It puts all the work on you. But I also know your well-being and your ability to do the science that you love is worth it. And so I would talk to your advisor and make really tangible, quantifiable goals and thank them for working with you and supporting you. Because again, when you put it in that perspective, they're generally like, oh, okay, I guess I'll support you.
That's an amazing point, Dionna. If I may also add an advice. So because it really happened to me, so we must not think that we have to produce as a non-disabled people person. So sometimes we feel that we have to be with superpower to
Yeah.
overcome things and do exactly the same thing. Please don't do that, because we have, like you said, for our well-being, we have to take our time. We have to do not put that pressure on us. And I think it's good too, because I thought like that so many times. So I have to show the others that I can do exactly the same things, and it cannot be sometimes, and it's okay. It's okay.
Absolutely. You're worth more than what you can produce. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I have another question, if there's still time. You mentioned that you had some teachers with disabilities. So do you think that that impacted in your future so that you decided to pursue a career that is so hard to follow? Then we all know that.
Yeah, I think being a kid, not knowing I was autistic, and not knowing why I didn't fit in with people made me really empathetic at a very young age. Whenever there was like an outcast or a new kid, I wanted to befriend them. I didn't always know how, but I wanted to befriend them because I don't want people to feel alone like I did. And so I think seeing those teachers, I mean, it they were just doing their jobs. I don't think they were showing up trying to change anyone's lives, right? But it impacted me a lot. I never forget my teacher in fourth grade, Richard Thompson, who had visual impairment. And as a kid, you don't know a lot of stuff. And so I remember thinking, well, he's blind, he can't see me. So all the kids, we'd get up and run around and he'd be like, I see you over there, go sit down. And I was like, I thought he can't see. And it really taught me, like I said, respect and to see them as any other teacher. I gave them the same considerations. And so it definitely helped expand my perspective of what people with disabilities could and couldn't do. Um, there were times, especially in high school, my teacher with cerebral palsy, a lot of the kids mistreated him, and it really made me upset. So I think it also gave me like wanting to advocate as well, even before I knew that that I had a similar background as them. So yeah, it really impacted me, and I think it was a privilege to see that as a kid. And I wish more people would see people with disabilities in all areas of life because we're capable. Um,
Right.
Right. That's fantastic. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up now. Katerina, I think you have a slide to show, um, and we have we do have some other questions, so we will follow up with you, maybe Dionna, about those, um, and. Yeah, so once we have that up there, so we have a survey for the webinar. If you could take a moment to fill that in, we would really appreciate your feedback. And then also just as a reminder, and Dionna, thank you so much for mentioning our new initiative to start this database of neuroscientists with disabilities. So please, if you have a moment to join us for that. And thank you so much, Dionna, for sharing your experience and your wisdom that you've accrued through your experiences. And there's a lot of I'm seeing a lot of thank yous as well in the Q&A. So I think people really appreciate your really rich perspective. So thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.